Welcome to another episode of the Token Tank. I'm Blockchain Brad, and today here at the Token Tank we invite prominent blockchain projects and startups to inform and explain exactly what they stand for. Our panelists today, our expert panelists, are focused solely and wholly on asking key questions, and the reason why is so that you, the valued crypto community, can essentially make informed crypto calls. Now today our expert panelists include none other than Crypto Candor, the leading lady to really provide candid conversations in crypto. We also have the crypto Lark, who essentially is so much more than just the Lark of blockchain. And we also have Andrew from Altcoin Buzz here to really explicate what quality ICOs stand for. So thank you all of you for being here today. Now, we are really here essentially to talk to Dr. Mo Dong. He is the co-founder and the CEO of the CELER Network. So who better to really explicate what they stand for than someone who's leading that team? So let's get stuck into it. Let's explore exactly what they're about. And let's start with scalability itself. Now, Mo, I want to talk to you about exactly what your slogan is. It says that you are essentially all about trying to bring a scalability by using the internet level scalability essentially to the blockchain. More specifically, celeritas is Latin for speed. So let's start trying to understand two things. One, what's the current problem related to scalability generally in the blockchain space, and why are you really changing the way in the terms of scalability and speed?
That is a great question, and I'm glad to be here. I'm really honored to have all the panelists here with me. On the scalability side, I think the scalability problem is a very apparent problem these days, or challenge in the blockchain space, because what scalability stands for is how fast the blockchain can process transactions, and what is the latency for blockchain to process a single transaction. Both of these parts is very slow in today's blockchain technology platforms. And the reason scalability is so important is because scalability translates directly to usability. If the blockchain is actually not usable, then there's no need to even talk about security. There is no need to talk about privacy. There's no need to talk about any of this. So scalability, I think, is the single most important problem or challenge that we face to the blockchain to actually bring mass adoption to blockchain. And for CELER, our slogan is bring internet scale to blockchain. What do we mean by that is that we are trying to bring the same level of scalability people are already familiar with when they're using daily internet applications, or like you're browsing Amazon or Google, this kind of interactiveness and this kind of a fluent user experience to the blockchain application. So that's what we are bringing to the table. And the key differentiator of CELER is not a public blockchain. It is an off-chain operating network that is operating on top of many different blockchains to accelerate them all. From a very high level, CELER is like a kind of a operating system with a focus on scalability for the entire blockchain ecosystem.
Sure, and we really appreciate that. So, Lark, what were you thinking in terms of extrapolating on that kind of concept of scalability?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking a lot about the ideas of off-chain scaling solutions recently, and obviously it's such a hot topic right now with the Lightning Network being slowly implemented on Bitcoin and the exploration of the Raiden Network and Trinity on Neo and all these different solutions. And yet we do see blockchains which are scaling on-chain. Now, are you worried that this is going to still be a relevant solution if we see projects like EOS becoming more prominent, where they have 50,000 transactions plus happening on chain?
Yeah, great question. So I think to answer that question, the real question behind that, I think you're asking, is essentially how scalable a blockchain actually needs to be, right? So what is like our final target? We have been talking about we need to be scalable, we need to process this many transactions, but what is that exactly that number? Right, so if it is like on the Visa level, let's say 20,000 transactions per second, then maybe some other kind of a more centralized consensus algorithm can take us there. But is Visa really the blockchain's target? I think it is not. Right, so Visa or what we should be targeting at is not, first of all, not just value transfer, but we should be targeting to bring all human economic activity to blockchain using this kind of a smart contract application and smart contract platforms. So this is like our final target of making the value flow as fluid as as information today. So that should be our final goal. Now, to realize that final goal, the amount of transaction we need to bring to blockchain can be tens of millions or even hundreds of millions. Now, if we're trying to put that number onto the blockchain, the layer 1 solution or like the fundamental change of consensus will have an upper limit for that. Because for any kind of a consensus algorithm change, or what people call like improvement on the layer 1 protocol, you're always still maintaining a decentralized system. You still have like multiple servers. You need to reach consensus among all of them. And there's this inherent communication overhead, and there's a theory you can prove that, okay, even with sharding, you cannot just have too many shards, because the more shard you have, it's actually giving you diminishing return. So the return curve looks like kind of like this. You grow pretty quickly, and then you kind of flat out, and then the improvement kind of diminishes. So that's where like the layer 2 scalability solution has to come in, where like there is no global consensus process involved.
Sure, but just to reiterate what Lark was saying though, Mo, what we were trying to understand more so is, let's do the comparative analysis of the on-chain versus the off-chain, in the sense that the TPS or on-chain can really scale now, and you are professing to be not only a non-blockchain project, you're an architecture by design, but we want to know why off-chain TPS, why off-chain scaling matters.
Yeah, so off-chain scaling matters in two fronts, right? So from a short-term view, it's probably the fastest go-to-market route. It gives you the quickest. Nowadays, like recently, we see all this like market turbulence, and things are like dropping out. The reason that behind this is like people are not seeing real adoptions, right? So we saw a lot of promises last year, but these promises didn't turn into truth or didn't turn into facts this year, especially we're approaching the end of this year. Right, so the off-chain solution can have the simplicity or can have the capability to let DApps go to market really fast. So that is kind of like the short-term value. And from the long-term point of view, as I mentioned, like comparing to the layer 1 blockchain solution, layer 2 or off-chain solution has the native fundamental advantage of not incurring this global consensus process. And therefore, it's truly horizontally scalable. It's basically the more node joins this off-chain network, the more scalable or more transaction in the process. And more importantly, it can handle this kind of very interactive transactions, right? So basically, if we want to run any kind of interactive applications on blockchain, we really need off-chain solutions.
Right. So you're actually partnering with a few on-chain solutions, correct? So Quarkchain, Qtum. Can you explain some of the benefits that actually has to CELER Network?
Yeah, so we are partnering with several on-chain solutions. So the first one is obviously Ethereum. There's like no partnership per se, but like we're working with the top researchers on Ethereum in the Ethereum community, including L4 Ventures, which is like a firm set up by a prestigious Ethereum researchers, and they are directly funded by Ethereum Foundation and Vitalik. Basically, so we're working a lot with them to try to define the open standard or community standard for off-chain scaling for Ethereum, and we are also working with Dfinity, noticeably. Recently, we made the announcement, and the reason that we're working with all these different public blockchain is because first of all, we want to make sure that from architecture point of view, CELER is blockchain agnostic. Right, CELER is this layer that can be, it's just like an operating system can be installed on a different brand of computers or different kind of hardwares. That's the first goal. And second is that we really want to see or experience what it means to develop on different kind of blockchains. And therefore also like choose the public blockchain, help the public blockchain that helps us most. So that's kind of our vision, that we're kind of becoming the narrow wrist of this entire. We're trying to become the narrow wrist of this entire ecosystem, where on top of CELER you have different kind of applications, and below CELER you have different kind of public blockchains. So and hopefully CELER can become this kind of entry point for all blockchain applications.
So as far as user interaction with your network, I watched the application demo where you guys did the mobile app, which was very impressive, by the way. But so will users know that they're using the network, or will it just be something that's sort of integrated in? Is there another interface? How exactly will people be using your network on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, this is an excellent question, right? So the user experience of blockchain has been a challenging one, and the user experience of off-chain platform is even more challenging than that. What we aim to do is that we are trying to again give people the look and feel of using internet. Think about how you use internet. You basically call Comcast and say, okay, give me an internet connection, and boom, you have internet. And then you can use on internet, you can have like different applications. Like you can do Google, YouTube, and all that. For CELER, we are trying to achieve the same goal where from the end user's point of view, using CELER should be really simple, that they will just be depositing or creating a connection towards the CELER network. And after the connection is established, it's just like you're connecting a Wi-Fi network. And you can kind of use different kind of a CELER application on top of that. And we are updating. Speaking of the demo, we are updating the demo pretty soon, and we're releasing a new version of a user application where we have open beta in early October.
I want to follow up a little bit on what Andrew was kind of skirting around. I want to actually jump into this a little bit more now. You didn't mention Bitcoin. Lightning Network is coming to Bitcoin, and it's already on, being tested with Litecoin, for example, and some others. Do you see that as big competition? Why are you not targeting Bitcoin, the biggest cryptocurrency out there currently, of course? And do you see Lightning Network as potentially being serious competition or invalidating what you do?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, from a competition point of view, I think infrastructure technology has to have something to compete for, right? So I think the interesting thing is that what are we competing for? There hasn't been any application that's starting to even consider or starting to actually full scale building on layer 2 network. So whoever gets the application or whoever creates the market is a success. And is a success for the whole layer 2 or whole off-chain space. So that's my view on the competition front. But for the specific of Lightning Network and the Radar Network, so we have many differences in terms of technology and also economic construct. For the technology front, we are not only supporting payments, but we are also supporting off-chain smart contract. This is something that no one does. And on the performance side, we have a routing algorithm that can route your payment through this kind of a off-chain state channel network with 10 times or to 15 times higher performance comparing to traditional, previous work, basically.
Right, and Ron, I just want to jump in there and ask you about that. Now, you've explained very clearly in previous interviews that you do have that C ecosystem, that C economy. That represents well with the whole concept that you represent being about speed in Latin. But I want to talk to you specifically about enterprise in relation to what Lark's talking about, because obviously, if you are going to really represent a really doable and functional off-chain solution, you are going to need to have enterprise connections well and truly built into your plan. What are you doing in the sense of trying to build out this effective off-chain solution in the business domain?
Yeah, good question. So I think for the enterprise solution part, the real question is that, so if we're talking about enterprise market, the first thing we need to answer is what are we selling, right? So what is the product to enterprise? On that front, I think no one has figured it out. And our view of that is that we're going to sell the, or not we're selling because we're a community project, right? So we're going to promote or create this easily deployable router software. So whoever are interested in becoming this payment or off-chain service provider can just easily use the pre-built or production-grade software that we have and start to accept the customers to connect to that. So that's kind of like, from first of all, the product point of view. Now, the second point of view is like, now we have a product, we need to reach these customers or reach these enterprises. We need to have channels, right? So for the channel part, we are recently doing a lot of business development talking with different payment providers and different like major project owners to try to create this cadence of adoption. But currently, it's a little bit early for me to name names. But you should be seeing some.
We don't mind if you do want to name names now. We'd appreciate it if you did drop some in.
Yeah.
Don't worry about those non-disclosure agreements. You'll be fine.
That's right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Sure.
And I just wanted to clarify one thing too. Are you planning to have CELER Network running on top of Bitcoin?
In the long term, yes.
But it won't be an initial. Initially, you're going to be Ethereum, Qtum, I suppose any others that might be interoperable, but and Quarkchain.
Yeah, so we currently already
Dfinity.
support Ethereum and Dfinity.
Right.
And yeah, we're building out more support for our like public blockchain partners, and we have a very good lineup of public blockchain partners as the names you mentioned.
Right.
Would you mind explaining some of the purposes of the actual token within your ecosystem?
Absolutely. So people has now finally after this kind of a bearish market start to think what is a crypto economics model that actually makes sense, right? So does like a payment or medium of payment token actually make sense, or it's something else? So for CELER, we are the first project to actually look into the crypto economic challenges in the layer 2 network. And we identified two. One is called scalability versus the liquidity trade-off. That is, you need to inject a lot of liquidity into your network so you can actually start to become very scalable and deliver transaction efficiently, especially for these payment service providers or off-chain service providers. And the second is that to maintain the security of the system, you have to have someone to watch your state or watch end users or IoT devices state when they're going offline or when they're entering into the power save mode, right? So these two crypto economic challenge or these two kind of a technical challenge cannot be solved by just simple technical solutions. And the beautiful thing about blockchain is that now you can introduce the economic incentive into this technical problem and try to incentivize people to solve that in a decentralized way. So we solve the liquidity shortage problem by incentivize people to lock their liquidity into the system and get CELER token as a reward. And the CELER token is then used in the liquidity backing auction as the priority token to incentivize the people who has previously provided the liquidity. Mm-hmm. And then the CELER token is also used as a work authorization token in the state guardian network, which whose purpose is to help people protect their state when they're not online. And the state guardian network's participant or the members will receive, of course, payment fee or service fee from the users who are waiting or to pay for these for this security guarding services. So that is kind of a very high-level overview, but we kind of covered the entire life cycle of off-chain scaling with this economic model.
And that's all in the seed economy model. Like all those token utilities, all those functions are in the seed economy model for the project?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
So on the top of liquidity, I'm interested in your proof of liquidity commitment mechanism and kind of how that's going to help support liquidity and functions on the networks. If you could explain that a little bit too.
Sure. So proof of liquidity. So we need the liquidity for the network to run. Now, the first thing that is the liquidity has to come from somewhere, right? So there are some people need to commit liquidity into the system, kind of lock the liquidity, saying that, okay, my money is going to be used in no other place but like potentially in CELER network. So how do we achieve that is to create this proof of liquidity commitment mining process. It's a virtual mining process where you basically tell the system to say that, okay, I have $100 and I want to lock this into CELER system for 2 weeks. And CELER system, you just lock that into a smart contract constructed by us, and you will receive CELER token as a reward. Now, how much CELER token you receive as a reward is determined by this concept of virtual mining power. And virtual mining power is calculated as the amount of liquidity you lock times the time length or time span of your commitment. So if like I commit $1 for 3 days, I have like mining power of 3. If I commit $1 for 5 days, I have mining power of 5. And the newly generated CELER token will be distributed proportionally according to this mining power. Now, the immediate next question is that why do I want to do this, right? So what's the use of the CELER token, right? So okay, I'm committing my liquidity, I'm spending the opportunity cost, I'm getting CELER token, now I want to use that. Now, CELER token is then used in the liquidity backing auction process and also in the state guardian network. So that's kind of complete the circle. You get the CELER token as a reward for your liquidity contribution or liquidity stability contribution, and then you use that in some other processes in the system.
I was also curious, how much is actually going to cost me to use the CELER network? If I'm going to be using that as my off-chain solution to send a transaction, how much additional am I going to need to actually be paying? What kind of transaction fees can I expect here?
Yeah, so that's a good thing, right? So using off-chain solution is always going to be cheaper than using on-chain solutions in most of the cases. So the transaction fee for sending, let's say, $1 today on the Ethereum blockchain, I just checked it now. It's about like a $0.25 transaction fee. So it's about 25% transaction fee if you think about it. Now, sending that in the reason for that is because blockchain doesn't care like whether you're sending $1 or 100 million. It's just the same kind of data. But for off-chain solutions, especially for relatively small and fluid payments or value transactions or like state transitions, small state transitions for each of the steps that we're executing a smart contract, the charge is can be really, really low. It's not because, again, it's fundamentally not incurring the entire global consensus process. Mm-hmm. It's just incurring the processing power or processing cost of the off-chain service provider, the involved off-chain service providers. So that's why it is fundamentally cheaper. So it's always going to be cheaper. My projection is going to be like it's probably around at least 1 to 2 orders of magnitude cheaper, which is like about maybe 100 times cheaper than on-chain solutions.
And if we
will those? Sorry, go ahead.
If we see a situation where we have massive demand on the actual blockchain, so let's say it's Ethereum, right, and there's 10 ICOs happening today, and there's all these transactions trying to be pushed through. And I understand this is off-chain, but at some point, those value transfers do need to be written back on the Ethereum blockchain. So
that's right.
Can you still guarantee the low fees in times of very high network fees of the blockchains that you're sort of off-chaining on top of?
Yeah, so I think this is also a very deep question that involves a pretty convoluted answer.
If we can keep it short though, as best as you can. Just
I'll keep it short. So
the big question,
the question is basically, okay, so what happens if we need to settle this back on chain? Hopefully, the settling it back on chain is not that often, because in most of the cases, or majority of the transaction is still entirely off chain. Now, there's a risk that people have been saying that, okay, what happens if like this entire world is just trying to settle the transactions or settle off-chain transactions all together on the blockchain? It's kind of a black swan event, but we should be preparing for that.
Happened in December to Bitcoin, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. So for that, what we should there are various ways to mitigate that, and sometimes it involves help from the layer 1 blockchain to notify or to be aware that, okay, this network is really congested. So, when you're settling this, I'm automatically giving you a longer timeout or stuff like that. So it kind of smooths out or trying to load balance or trying to absorb the flash load or flash crowd of this processing power. And that is why we are kind of collaborating also with some of the emerging blockchains, because for them, changing the protocol is really easy. So we can kind of make the layer 1 work for layer 2 more.
Mm.
So usually after transaction speeds, transaction fees, the next question people, or at least the community always see, is security. That's always a big one. So what are you guys doing to ensure security and privacy within the network?
Right. So I will answer the privacy part because that's easy. For privacy, off-chain solution is always strictly better than on-chain solution, because for on-chain solutions, everyone sees your transaction. Literally everyone sees your transaction. But for on-chain solutions, there are various ways to obfuscate it. Even without any obfuscation, only a very limited part of the network sees your transaction. After your transaction is done, the intermediary step is just completely destroyed. Let's say you're playing a chess and betting on chess game's result. In the end of the chess game, from the blockchain point of view, it seems that you just transfer each other some money. But in the middle, a lot of things happen. You play the chess, you make this move, you make that move, and stuff like that. So the privacy is definitely better. Now, about security. Any kind of off-chain solutions, the security is always anchored back to the underlying blockchain. The reason that this off-chain thing is always secure is that we treat this underlying blockchain not as a processing engine, but as a supreme court, right? So it's like, we kind of deposit money onto this blockchain as our security bond. And then, holding this bond, we're doing all sorts of off-chain transactions, and at the end, we want to revert to the blockchain, and that's the time. If someone is trying to be malicious and trying to game the system, the other guy will catch it and try to go to the on-chain smart contract to start to having a dispute process and to submit a fraud proof. The security is therefore guaranteed. So there's no incentive for the malicious people or malicious user to actually try to game the system.
Looking on the other side of things, what are the negatives of the off-chain scaling? Obviously, we've said a lot of positives about it, but in comparison to on-chain scaling and other options, what are the negatives or the challenges? Yeah,
so the negatives of the challenges are, the first is about the state availability, that you kind of always have to online all the time. If there's no other thing done. And the second is the liquidity. The networks has to have a lot of liquidity to let it run really smoothly. Now, these two questions again these two challenges are very hard to address from a pure technical point of view. That's why CELER introduced this entire economic stack targeted to kind of smooth out the trade-offs brought by the layer 2 solution.
Right, and on that note also, Mo, what about finality as well? Because you've mentioned this before, obviously the consensus algorithms of the on-chain, they have finality built into them often. It's different with you. Can you talk us through the inherent risks of finality?
Oh, so yeah, so I think so for on-chain solutions, the finality is so currently we don't have finality, right? So there is no blockchain has finality anywhere. Casper is trying to introduce that. Basically a proof of stake on Ethereum is trying to introduce the concept of finality. But the off-chain solutions of finality is always going to be on the same level or strictly better than the on-chain finality. So take the example of payment channel like Lightning, Radium, or even for CELER's initial implementation, generalized state channels. These underlying technology has instant finality. So whenever a transaction is done on this network, the finality is instant. There's no way to have you to revert back.
So I guess, yeah. Sure. So I wanted to ask you on that note, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but
no problem. Yeah.
The thing I wanted to ask and allude to in this discussion about risks is sort of flipping that back again. Mm-hmm. Is it fair to say that you, by incorporating and being interoperable with on-chain solutions, does it make those on-chain blockchains more efficient and more productive and just overall better performers?
Yes, yes, that's absolutely true, and we're helping the underlying blockchain every way we can.
Right.
Mo, do you think that you're too early? I mean, a lot of blockchains, maybe Ethereum as an exception, because it has enough network traffic going, because it only has 15 transactions per second to actually be busy for every block. But in terms of the other blockchains, you're working with Quarkchain, for example, and Qtum, and Dfinity, all these different guys, no one's actually really busy enough yet to need desperately these off-chain solutions, except perhaps Bitcoin and Ethereum, who have this first mover advantage under the dinosaurs. So do you think that you're too early to the game to really be highly relevant right now in terms of providing off-chain scaling solutions, something that may not be needed for quite a few years? And if that does prove to be the case, is your business ready to withstand a couple of years of not seeing a lot of network traffic?
A good question.
So yeah, so I think this is definitely not too early, right? So think about why some of the popular cryptocurrency game died, almost like basically died, right? So people just like feel, okay, playing anything on blockchain or doing anything on blockchain is just too painful. You know, you have all these like D-app browsers, you have all these D-apps, but the D-apps daily active user is about 300. It's not because there aren't a lot of users using these apps. It's because, you know, I witnessed this firsthand. We're doing like user surveys and stuff. So a user look at this app and click on it and wait for 2 seconds, and the app is not responding because, of course, it's waiting for the block confirmation, right? So the user just say, okay, this app is buggy, right? So I'm deleting this entire wallet because like this wallet is probably buggy. But that's not the case, right? It's just like block confirmation time is really slow. Now, what CELER can bring is that CELER can merge this gap. Of like you know, the traditional blockchain application, which is slow and requires the block confirmation for each and every step you make, to the point that it feels like you're interacting with a normal, you know, app of your everyday life. So I think CELER can actually help the blockchain to reach mass adoption faster. And is very much relevant technology.
So Mo, just to clarify, what you're saying is that there's a need for speed for us, you know, for all proponents of blockchain becoming real to make it. Are you saying that we need something like you to even get to mass adoption?
That's right. That's our view. Yes.
I think we have time for about 3 more questions. So perhaps, Crypto Candor, would you like to continue on?
Sure. So in regards to the business team, are there any expected add-ons as your current team is pretty small?
So on the business side or on the technical side, or in general?
I guess in general, probably.
Yeah. So you know, if you check out our new website, we have expanded the team pretty significantly over the last 1 month. Now we have about like 13 people now. We still have like 3 more people coming in. And our entire headcount is around like 16 people right now. So we're expanding pretty quickly. And all the folks joining are very high-profile engineers and also, you know, on the business side as well.
Yeah, because you guys
got to get some suits in there, not just the nerds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a very academic team right now. So obviously, we're thinking, are there any more business development managers? People on more of the partnership side or the sales side or the business side of things coming in, not just more engineers and tech people.
So so first of all, I got it seems that I got a PhD, so I kind of got classified as the engineer folks as well. But you know, I have been doing product manager and also on the business side for my previous startups also.
Yeah, that was a very
yeah.
Yeah.
But definitely we're looking for marketing hires. We're looking for, you know, product marketing. We're looking for especially building out the community for the developers. These are all key areas of our focus of hiring now.
Sure.
Very important.
And what about ICO? I mean, let's talk about, you know, Andrew, you're the ICO guy.
Yeah,
let's
I wanted to ask a little bit about your $30 million hard cap, or the raising $30 million or in this kind of bear market. How have the current market conditions been affected you? Why did you guys feel the need to raise that much money, and how's it all going currently?
So we have announced, you know, we closed the contribution on July 22nd.
That was for the pre-sale, is that right?
Right, but regarding ICO, I'm not allowed to talk about the ICO on the YouTube channel directly. So
sure.
sorry about that.
And Mo, I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep pushing on this one because one of the things that we really do need to have a bit more transparency on is the metrics themselves. And the reason being is because essentially when people jump into blockchain, they're not just jumping in for speculation. They're actually doing their DD, and they need some of this information to really make informed decisions. So what can you tell us? Obviously have just issues of disclosure right now, but for the audience who are literally asking these questions in your Telegram, what can you tell them in terms of what to expect in the future, even dates?
So for the dates, we all know the market currently is a little bit slow, and in terms of the exact dates and detail, when we actually announce any kind of token generation event, we'll have a proper announcement of all the details about what we did, what was the past traces, right before that. And
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you again for
to
give us some information on that. Now, I want to talk to you about partnerships for the future. I want to hear more about what essentially you're doing in terms of collaborating. Again, I want to hear more about evidence of use case as well. Can you tell us some names of some people you're talking to right now that can give us confidence that you're moving in that direction?
Yeah, definitely. So we are talking with a lot of great projects right now. We recently announced with Dfinity, L4 from Ethereum. They are all very high-profile projects and researchers. And we have already established a partner with Qtum IO.
Sure. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean more moving in the traditional business sector beyond the crypto related, blockchain related enterprises. What are you doing in terms of traditional business?
Right. In the traditional business, so we're talking with a few traditional gaming company, pretty big names. One of the, I would say, probably one of the top 10 gaming companies, traditional gaming companies, not blockchain gaming companies now. But we haven't reached the point that we're ready to make announcements. So the style for CELER, as you might notice, is that we don't make an announcement if we don't have any concrete thing already delivered. So for Dfinity, we have delivered the actual smart contract on Dfinity, and for the L4, we have announced a very concrete plan of working together. And now we're organizing basically a state channel researcher calls every week. So yeah.
Right. Obviously, we could talk for hours, on this, and I appreciate your time. We have run out of time today to really explore what the CELER Network is about. I thank you once again for your time, Mo. Now, I just want to reiterate it once again. The CELER Network stands for essentially a project which is trying to bring internet-level scalability into the blockchain domain, and certainly, hopefully, for all of those who've listened today, we hope you've understood a little bit more about what they stand for. We're going to stand by now and have a conversation. We're going to discuss a little bit more about what we think personally of this discussion we've had with you today, Mo. But once again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you in the future once again.
Thank you,
Thank
Bob.
you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thank you for your guys' time. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. So now, guys, it's time to discuss what we think. What were our impressions of essentially Mo and the CELER Network? Let's have a really open discussion so that we can open up the conversation to the crypto community. So what do you guys think?
So I think the biggest problem that they're going to have, or at least the biggest problem I had, is I always talk about that, I came from a non-tech background. I'm just an average person trying to kind of sift my way through all this information like everyone else. And conceptualizing that project and wrapping my head around trying to actually visualize on a day-to-day basis how I'm going to interact with it, what it looks like, what interfaces I'm going to see it in. Bitcoin, I know when I'm doing something or I'm working with blockchain, I understand the concept. But this, to me, the hardest part for them is going to be translating it, I think, the project to a language that people understand.
Yeah, and the thing is, I strongly felt throughout this, and then perhaps it was because I led the interview and I wanted just to, obviously be culpable if in fact I haven't done and elicited the right information. But I felt like we really didn't get a chance to really explore exactly what the off-chain connection is for on-chain, and also with regard to their C stack. They have this stack solution that's really important for us to move into enterprise. Without it, it's not going to happen. And Mo perhaps really didn't articulate that well because of his background. But that's where we come in. I mean, we can perhaps translate that a bit more through these conversations at the end. But I felt like we really didn't show the stellar nature of what Celer's trying to do through some of the way it evolved, because we focus so much.
They have so many good partnerships with the Quarkchain, Dfinity, and obviously I think they're looking at Qtum and Ethereum. But yeah, it's hard for the viewers to conceptualize, as Alex said, like how that's actually going to play a part and how that's actually going to benefit both parties. Like, are we actually going to be using CELER Network? Because obviously Mo did answer that, but it's going to be hard for viewers to understand, I reckon.
Yeah, it's the same kind of confusion you're seeing right now with like Lightning Network around Bitcoin. People are like, I have to go open up like a state channel like WTF, and it has to be, of course, be really, really user friendly. I know they're going to push in that direction, but at the same time, we also do have, enough competition already very well established in the space. We do have Raiden already. We do have the Lightning Network, which is,
and then Trinity for Neo.
Nodes. Exactly.
But what was really interesting, and what sets for me CELER apart from them, is that they have a multitude of connections with current on-chain solutions. So it's not just one, like with Lightning Network. They've already evidenced 3 or 4 in the conversation, and these are really big players like Dfinity. Yes, it has controversies with its raise, but in terms of tech, they are aligning, in my opinion anyway, with high-quality on-chain blockchains. And
so blockchain agnostic.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that in itself is a pretty defining factor on why it's different, which is also kind of the hardest reason why it makes it difficult to understand, because it's like, well, all of these different chains have their individual ways to increase scaling and transaction speed or whatever, and this project's just planning to like jump on a lot of other projects and solve that problem.
And the thing too, what I really like is that they aren't a blockchain as well. And that really I don't think we really sort of elicited that reality in terms of their design, because what they're trying to do is provide a very different algorithmic solution, and not even do that typical consensus style that you see in the current on-chain solutions. And so for that alone, the imperative for something to address and redress some of the scaling solutions really has to happen. And from what I can perceive so far, there's nothing necessarily better out there than CELER in trying to do this right now.
I think they've done pretty good uses for the token utility under the C economy and the liquidity backing options, and obviously, the liquidity versus availability issues. I think they've actually done a pretty good use case for it as well.
Yeah, and the payments as well. I mean, a lot of the things that they're trying to do, one of them is actually facilitate and support payment solutions, which is like one of the key use cases. And what I really liked at the end is he talked about the practical use cases like gamification, because that, from many different experts I've talked to, they've always said that gaming is one of the really good indicators of a movement in the right direction. And if they are aligning with, as Mo has said, big gaming companies, and that's a good indicator that this is not just all spiel and all a sales pitch.
Smoke and mirrors.
Right.
As Mo said, they only like releasing partnerships once they've got proper strategic partnerships.
I value that.
I value that like quite highly as well.
It's not like we're going to make an announcement about the announcement that we're going to make for the announcement next week. It's like, I'd rather wait and have them be like, hey, look what we did, and this is absolutely happening right now, versus, hey, in 2 weeks we're going to tell you something that might happen about 3 weeks.
Yeah, they're very safe. But what do you think though, Lark, about that? I mean, you do a lot of stuff in relation to PR. You are such a prominent channel. Do you think they're doing enough though in terms of PR and connecting with their audience?
Not yet. I don't think so. But at the same time, I feel like they're connecting with the businesses, which is definitely an important step in terms of, getting that excited community behind them. It's tricky. Like, hey, we're an off-chain scaling solution. Join our community. And that's definitely tricky, especially when you do have a lot of academics who are pushing the idea, and then you've got some business people, and that's great. But I think CELER is one of those things that a lot of people are going to end up using and have no idea they're using it, much like so many of the backroom things that actually run the internet. Everyone knows what Facebook is, but nobody knows how the hell it runs. Right?
Exactly.
The protocols used to run it. I think CELER might end up being one of those kind of things. But at the same time, if you could invest in the infrastructure that built Facebook, I mean, just think of, and Facebook's actually a great example. We didn't even mention, I know they're talking about video games, and video games are a great example of, okay, let's imagine you get like, a 100th of a cent every time you bash an orc or something in an RPG. Well, that's great. But what about hitting a like on Facebook? That needs off-chain scaling solutions. We see that even with Steam, it's like so clunky and slow, and it's like I get disincentivized to even like upvote or comment over there on people who comment on my videos because it's so damn slow to do it.
Well, you know what's funny is that even ontology, we've talked about this in the past, but if you go and ask even most of the speakers who've done their DD on ontology, that in itself is a very confusing and very difficult to understand platform and architecture. And this is kind of in that same vein. So perhaps one of the things they need to do more so is more of this PR, more of these robust discussions about and unpacking parts of them in bite-sized chunks. But I did want to ask you guys this as perhaps one last question as a wrap-up. What are you thinking about their reticence to really discuss their tokenomics, you know, to discuss their pricing?
They're being they're holding it back, but as long as they do release it before the crowd sale, and then it gives the investors a chance to obviously do their due diligence and obviously learn about it, I think that's probably good enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've posted that they're going to do some sort of event that's in their Telegram, so people are aware that that is possible. I just wonder, though, you know, with regard to transparency and the imperative of all the information being out there, because people do invest in the outset. From the outset, that's how they regard it in the beginning, because they use every bit of information to decide if they're going to support it. So is it reasonable that they don't release this information, you know, for people like us, for everybody out there who are trying to understand it?
I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt based on how they're dealing with their partnerships and the fact that they're definitively just choosing to release information when it's solid and say that this might just be culturally like within their company, the way that they work. Like it may just make the most sense for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, like Andrew said, as long as they do it beforehand, they give people time and people can educate themselves. And I think that's fine. And it's different than what we're used to seeing, but different doesn't mean bad or wrong. It just means different, right? So, I mean, who knows?
We've seen lots of other players do this too, and it depends so much on their legal team and who they're talking to, because there is not a lot of direct, strict, clear regulation around so much of what's going on in the ICO space. So many lawyers are just telling them to play it like as safe as possible and say nothing that can get us into trouble later.
Yeah.
Basically.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I think that wraps it up for us for the next episode of the Token Tank. Obviously, for all those who've just subscribed or just connected with us, welcome to the Token Tank, and we certainly will be really showcasing more key projects in the future. But right now, if you'd like to leave a comment, don't hesitate. We really do value everything that you say, so drop it down below. But on behalf of all the members of the Token Tank, thank you very much for your time. And personally, I'd like to acknowledge the expert panelists of the day. Thank you very much to Candor. Thank you very much, Lark. Thank you, Andrew from Altcoin Buzz. We look forward to looking into deeper projects, really exploring what the blockchain has to offer. And until next time, it's Blockchain Brad signing out. Thank you very much.